Okay. Notes on overused story structures. Let's go.
Last year I made a video that said to avoid certain story structures because they were used too much.
I have 75 viewers. I believe that, Zoinko, because you're entertaining. That's why I said you should stream, bro. You would fucking pop off because you don't have anything interesting to say, but you know things that are interesting that we'll say for you, which is a good skill to have.
And I got a lot of pushback. That video got a lot of views, but the comments section
because I have too many platforms, so that's why. That makes sense, Zoinko. If you're watching yourself on 1,000 different platforms, does that still mean that you have 1,000 viewers? Because you're counted 1,000 times? Damn, guys. I think I need to, like, multiply my viewership by 4 for all 4 of the places that I stream on.
Really lit up. I got a lot of authors saying, well, what about this book? Or they just plain disagreed with me. So this video will offer a few more story structures that are overused, and I'll also debate the authors who disagreed with me. Now, I did see a lot of comments like this one, but if 20 to 30% of authors think they are all the 0.01% of authors, they might be fooling themselves.
Yeah.
And as always, I am just giving general principles. They are not hard and fast rules. But I would say that you'd be wise to at least considering them when you're crafting your novel. Now, if you've written one of these, or perhaps several of these, don't despair. You might have pulled it off. Some authors can take these ideas and spin them into gold. It's just much more difficult to do. What I'm really saying in this video is be wary of these storylines because they're so common, they create a lot of pitfalls that are tough to avoid. 1. It was all just a dream. Now, I don't have trouble per se with dreams. A character telling another character their dream, or a character
I like the the reveal idea. Like, reveal of why the world is the way that it is. And it's a one-liner. Such as, greatest example currently is Expedition 33. I'm not going to spoil it, because if you haven't played the game, you should play the game. It's fucking amazing. Everyone leave the stream. This is a restream. Oh, okay, Zoinko. This is a restream? That makes sense. Oh, you would know, Zoinko, because you're a part of the stream, so you would know that it's a restream. Oh, yeah. Would that not also be the fact of that I am using a program called Restream? I'm not quite sure. I don't know, and I don't even know where they pull these viewers from, because I'm like, I ain't got 5... wait, I have 3... Oh, it's because it's the total amount of views, right? So it's like, it's fucking stupid for Twitter, because even if someone just, like, sees it in their timeline, it counts as a view for the stream. And it will always stay at that. It will never go down. So if you have, like, I have, like, 28 to 42 views, but it's like, yeah, well, that's not... That's probably just people scrolling through it in their timeline, right? But Restream is a little weird. I don't know. I'm still getting used to using it. Oh, it's a one-liner, right? So, like, solving the world is a one-liner. My one-liner is... The moon fell from the sky. And that's the reason why the world is the way that it is. That's my one-liner for the reveal of the world.
Interpreting someone else's dream? I mean, dreams are fascinating, right? We've known this since way before Freud started analyzing them. They can present a window into your character's unconscious that you can't get at any other way. But it is a problem when the narrator presents what's happening as real life, and then they pull the rug out from under the reader and says, surprise, it was all a dream. That is low-down trick.
And... Okay, I don't think I'm sweating anymore. I'm gonna go put my fucking tooth back on. I can get out, no problem. The second I try to get back in, I smash into the fucking mic. Alright.
and it abuses the reader's trust. Still, some authors argued with me about this one. Just remember that if you do gist a dream, the worst place to do it is at the beginning of the story. That's because you're not giving the reader any information before you say, guess what, everything I've told you so far, it's fake. If you do it, you have to do it in the middle part of the book. Lastly, there are no stakes in a dream. Unless this is Inception and the characters can actually die in a dream, nothing real ever happens in a dream, so nothing bad could ever really happen. Real life has stakes, and you need stakes to tell good stories. Now, I will give one exception. If the dream is more of a prophecy, where the character is seeing something that happens in the future, then that's perfectly fine. That's not actually a dream. They are imagining what's going to be real. Two people talking in a bar. Most of you probably just said, what's so wrong with people talking in a bar? And a lot of commenters said the exact same thing. Now, don't get me wrong, I can think of a lot of incredible scenes set in bars. There's nothing explicitly wrong with it unless you've read 10,000 unpublished stories and books like I have, and I just see it again and again and again and again. And the trouble with a lot of these bar scenes is that they include all dialogue and zero action. Younger, beginning writers tend to love bars because they seem like fascinating, forbidden places. They just become less fascinating when everybody sets a scene in them, and they become soggy with too much dialogue. And let me say, it's particularly a problem with short stories if you set the whole short story inside a bar. Now, if you find yourself thinking, I need to set my next scene in a bar, I want you first to ask yourself some questions. One, is there a fresher, more original location that I could choose? Ideally, a location where characters can be moving and doing things while they're talking. If not, then go ahead and set it in a bar. But if you do end up changing the location, I think your readers will probably appreciate it. 3, 0 to 0. Does your hero change at all? Or are they the exact same person at the end of the story as they were at the beginning? In general,
definitely Husai is literally a completely different person at the end of the story. But the interesting thing about that is the only reason why he's a completely different person is because he's actually a different person at the beginning of the book. And he's just reverting back to his state of basically being an adventurer in his youth. But since you've never seen Husai from before, it's only referenced. The only way you would know that is if you paid attention to how he's talked about in the past and kind of put two and two together from other characters' perspectives.
When your hero goes on a journey, you want that journey to change them in some way. Now, this is the point that actually most authors disagreed with me. The most common objection was, well, what about episodic fiction? Like a detective series or an episodic television show. And that's a good exception. For those, it's perfectly fine to have a hero that, in general, doesn't really change that much. Consider Sherlock Holmes. He's basically the same character throughout all the books. But in general, I see a lot of short stories and novels where the character isn't changing, and the story would be better if the character did change in some way. I'll also say all the commenters brought up a lot of exceptions, and some of them I was like, you sure that character doesn't change? I would encourage you to look for more subtle changes in character. For instance, look at James Bond. We normally would think of him as an unchanging character. Each new movie and book starts with him as basically the same person. He still takes martinis stirred not shaken, dresses debonair, and loves the ladies. But look at a movie like Skyfall. Here we see him getting old and failing all the examinations. We have never seen Bond deal with that type of failure before, and that exposes a new side of his character. And in Casino Royale, after getting betrayed by Vesper Lynd, he's a little bit jaded and heartbroken and wary of new women. Most stories where authors point out and say, this character doesn't change, I can point out small things in that story which do change that character in subtle but important ways. Most of the time that you're writing a novel or a trilogy, you want a character arc over that book or books. And one last thought, if your character changes from a 0 to a hero and back to a 0 again, that is not a 0 to 0 story. That has a lot of character change. 4, the bathtub story. A bathtub story is where a character never moves from a single location. In general, it's a dangerous narrative technique to trap a character in a single location and not let them move for the entire story, because the reader gets bored with the lack of location change. But I got a lot of authors disagreeing with me on this one and usually citing specific stories. No Exit is a great example. And Nicholson Baker has a story which takes place entirely inside an elevator. Yes, the whole novel. And it was a fun experimental book. Or look at 12 Angry Men, a story that takes place entirely inside of a jury deliberation room. I think it's key though to figure out how these stories are pulled off. It's because 1, they're debating the death penalty for a man, so there's tons of tension, and 2, they are arguing constantly, so there's tons of conflict. If you choose to set your story inside a single location, you just have to be very aware of those limitations. You're essentially writing a play. In plays, you're limited to a single location or a couple limitations because they have to change the whole set every time they move somewhere. Part of the glory of the form of of the novel is being able to jump between planets and countries and continents and cities through no effort at all. So if you decide to limit yourself to only a single location, you better make sure that your conflict and your tension are on point or the whole story will collapse. 5. The non-human POV twist. This is when you thought you were reading about a human, but surprise, the character is actually a dog. And many authors pointed out how they love stories with animal characters. But I don't have a problem with books with all animal characters. Animal Farm.
Hold on a second.
On point or the whole story will collapse. 5. The
non-human POV twist.
Human POV twist. This is when you thought you were reading about a human, but surprise, the character is actually a dog. And many authors pointed out how they love stories with animal characters. But I don't have a problem with books with all animal characters.
You know what's my favorite story of all time with animal characters? If you've never seen or read Redwall, you should check it out. So fucking epic. This is the epitome of what kids shows used to be, guys. Mice versus rats. What's become popular in isekai stories is the used to be human lead. Who's now like for instance, my favorite one is reincarnated as a slime. Is by far my favorite isekai besides Overlord. I think Slime is better than Overlord, but I think that's only because I need more seasons of Overlord. It needs to be developed more. I haven't read through the manga, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, this series, fucking amazing. And it's meant for, like, kids and young adults, right?
Animal Farm. Wonderful. Watership Down with all those rabbits. Amazing. The only trouble is when you're trying to pull a cheap trick on the reader. You're pretending that the narrator's human, then suddenly they're a dog or a cat or a flea or whatever. It's not a good plot twist, and it's not half as original as you would think it is. There's a difference between a earned surprise and a cheap surprise. You want surprises that make the reader feel, oh, I should have known that all along, not make them feel like they've been emotionally manipulated. 6. Thinly disguised wish fulfillment.
Reincarnated as a sword, or a dungeon core, a spoon, a monster, whatever the case. They have human intelligence, remember being human, but aren't anymore. Yeah. Thinly disguised wish fulfillment.
If you're trying to write about the fantasies of your readers and you're speaking directly to them, well, that can work. Sometimes when I read a book, it seems like the protagonist is an alter ego of the author, and the author has made them incredibly good looking and sexually promiscuous, extremely wealthy, and wildly smart and successful. Basically, they're writing this book so they can pretend to be someone much better than they are. Now, some authors left comments that disagreed with me saying, hey, wish fulfillments can be really fun to read. I think they're right that wish fulfillment novels can be fun to read, but I think others can be a little bit cringy. Like you're getting a therapy session with the author and thinking, did you just write down all your fantasies inside a book? I know you a little too well now. Or is the author just showing how big their ego is? Awkward. So just be wary about how much.
If you're gonna write an extremely like the thing is, it's not necessarily even that Husai is attractive. He's just buff as fuck. But he doesn't even start off buff as fuck. He's kind of flabby at the beginning, but like he is consistently working out through the book, consistently doing everything that he can to bring his strength back to the level it needs to be. But he's the type of person that like practices like in the quiet. Like he'll be sitting there in a robe doing like arm crunches while, you know, he's talking to people. And he's like trying to hide that he's like doing it. And it's like all these tiny little things that are like build up the fact that, and then, you know, the first time he actually gets out on the battlefield, everyone looks at him and they're like, and he's like buff as fuck. The reader's this is gonna be, actually, guys, You know what we were talking about, things that the reader knows that, like, characters don't? Like, the rest of the characters don't, and, like, the example given was, like, Kenpachi with his eye patch. Like, the reader, I think Levi proposed this, the fact that the viewer knows that Kenpachi's not fighting at full strength because he still has his eye patch on. And what I want for this is I want people to anticipate when Husai is actually going to go onto the battlefield, and they're all going to know, as the reader, that Husai is now buff, and before he was a little bit flabby. And that's going to be like, because he's been slowly working on this shit in the background for that moment for him to shine. So all the characters are like, yo, dude, what are you doing? Don't do that. No! And then he gets up there and they're like, ooh, oh. And he's like guts fucking cutting people down with his fucking greatsword. Like, get the fuck out of here. I'm done with this shit. I've had it. Let's fucking just move on with this shit.
The book is revealing about you as an author. Lastly, number 7, don't make your main character an author. Stephen King has done this to death, and listen, if you are Stephen King, I give you a pass. Go ahead and do this. And it's not like I'm saying nobody should ever write an author character ever again. I'm just saying it's really overused and you should think twice. Essentially, you have to work
5-year-old temper tantrum against the toy soldiers
because it's been done so many times already. Also, there are so many fascinating professions out there. It feels like a bit of a cop-out to be like, my main character's profession is the same as mine. Your character could be an underwater welder. They could be a soap maker. They could be a bike courier. I will say there's a clear exception for books that are actually about authorship. For instance, if the main character steals a book from an author who's recently died and then passes that book off as its own, okay, that's an interesting idea, and you can't write that idea without the main character being an author. I'm gonna add one more overused story structure that I didn't mention in the original video: amnesia. There are 100 times more cases of amnesia in books than there are in hospitals. It's a plot device that manipulates the reader a little bit too easily and too cheesily. I'm a poet. If you do an amnesia story, you have to work really, really hard to come up with an original angle, simply because there's so many stories out there. Yes, if you have an idea like 50 First Dates or The Bourne Identity, then that sort of concept will rise above the rest. But if you're just having a character experience amnesia so they can have a fling with a new boyfriend, or they can wake up and not recognize their mother, then you probably need to find a more original angle. The real trouble with amnesia is writers use it to get them out of a sticky corner. That's why amnesia happens every other episode in soap operas, because the writers realize, like, we have a problem. I know, let's have them forget everything. So don't use amnesia when you didn't plot properly and you just don't know what else to do. Now listen, some of you are going to view these as challenges, and that's okay. You are a rebel, an anti-authoritarian, and honestly, those are good traits to have as an author. You can definitely write whatever you want to. But if you try to break all of these rules at once, come on, now you're just getting a little too ambitious.
True. Alright, that's another video down, boys. Go give them a like and a subscribe and a little, you know, comment if you liked it or you got anything to add. Always a good time. I think that would be definitely the second notes we've been taking on this, but who knows.